Cramer. I want to thank you for being here. This is the WannaCyber podcast. And this podcast is basically an excuse for me to hang out with my friends and talk about things that I think are important. Because it turns out in the internet age, if you've got the internet and a computer, they'll just let you talk all you want and let you put it on the
Yeah.
internet. People will tune in sometimes. This was a great opportunity for the two of us to come hang out. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your background? And then I'll explain for our viewers why it is that I think they should care about your opinion.
All right, that works. That works. Hey, it's good to see you. It's been quite a while. My name is Cramer Snuggs. I am the director of managed services at Clare Computer Solutions. I also own a managed services firm out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, Cascade Technologies. I What's the best word to put this? I'm a guru for protecting small businesses and providing best in class service. Over the years of developing my own MSP and joining Claire, this thing, operational maturity along the way came up and in a new way to grade an MSP, if you will. We all look at EBITDA. We look at all these other factors that we try to determine just how great an MSP is along the way. And one of those things, the OMS is one of the things that I really focused on. And that's been one of the best journeys for me being at Claire is being in a organization with a higher operational maturity level and continuing to strive. So yeah, I love building support teams. I love building managed services and just striving to continue to be the best in delivery when it comes along, when it comes to managed services and managed services providers.
Awesome. So our topic today is remote work. And one of the
Yeah.
reasons that I wanted to have you on to have this discussion, aside from the purely selfish, it gave me an excuse to get on your calendar and hang out a little bit, is that you have that unique perspective. I've known you in all of the roles, right? I've known you as an employer and I've known you as an employee, and you're fulfilling both of those roles now still. And
Yep.
you've dealt with remote workers, you've been a remote worker. And you remember Evie, we first met each other working at SimSpace, and Evie was on last week with me talking about HR's perspective, some of the pieces of advice and opinion that I've shared when it comes to being a good employer, how you attract good employees, et cetera. We walked through some of those. And one of the big topics for us was remote work. What I realized is I've been remote working since 2015.
Yeah.
I am just now getting the hang of it, right? But in all seriousness, like it's something where you're like, oh yeah, that'll be easy. And I feel like there have been missteps by employers in my past. I'll give you the example. At one point, the first remote work job I had, I went through a period of really intense anxiety because I did not feel tasked effectively enough. And
Ooh.
so I was travel working and I'd be on the road and I'd work a ton of hours and I'd come back and their thought was they got their labor out of me while I was on the road. And so they didn't give me a ton of tasking when I got back because I did work 70 hours. They didn't really
Yeah.
expect a lot out of me the next week, but you know what wasn't done? It wasn't communicated effectively with me. Take it easy. And so I was sitting here, I'm like, every time the phone rang, every time somebody's like, you get that doom, doom of a Teams meeting, I was like, shit, are they about to fire me? And it was a nonsensical way for me to feel because they were thrilled with me, but I didn't know that. And it took me a long time. Like I actually had a panic attack and ended up in the hospital during this time. And
No,
knowing your heart, I'm confident that is not a a desire for you, for your
no.
employees. So let's talk about it first from the perspective of the employer. As an
Mm.
employer, what sorts of things do you recommend to help your employees be effective and accountable remote workers?
Yeah, man, there's a lot to unpack there. Remote work it requires a high level of discipline. For me, it's I operate from home no different than if I was in an office. And thanks to today's technology, I'm constantly in and out of the conference room. I'm constantly in and out of meetings. Other than being almost 3,000 miles away from the office, the biggest thing for me is I just try to operate as if I was there at the office. Distractions, right? I think that to be successful in a remote space, it requires almost being able to separate yourself from the rest of the household, the rest of your world. For me, I've got an office, I've got 2 doors, and I tend to come in, close the doors, and I'm, usually I'm here until I walk out at the end of the day.
'Cause your office is like mine. It's a little bit, it's like a Florida room, right? Where it's
Yeah.
yeah.
The old office used to be the one with all the
Uh,
windows, but yeah, no, I'm definitely here and I'm able to isolate myself. Um, the other key to it is really the constant communication, right? So whether it's Teams, email, on the phone, over meetings, whatever it may be, it's just constantly trying to engage. I'm constantly checking in with my employees. Just, is there anything I could do for you? When I hire somebody new that's remote, I try to have that conversation after the first couple of weeks. Hey, how's it going? Do you feel like you're successful in this remote role? Is there something that I could do to make you more successful being remote? So there's that piece of it. It poses its own challenges though. I will say it's at the same time, remote or not, I try not to micromanage those employees. So I don't want them to feel like they're constantly under somebody's thumb or I'm constantly looking over their shoulder or like that.
while
So I try to give them a little bit of leeway.
not installing idle monitoring software so they feel the need to jiggle their mouse
Yeah.
constantly.
But no, I look at it this way. If I had to get to a point where I'm installing something like that on a machine, either I am not being the proper employer or I don't have the right person in that seat.
Mhm.
That's what it comes down. There's
So
no trust.
I'm a big believer in that. So I have said for a long time, it's really interesting how often this very topic comes up. And it's all the way up and down. A while back, a friend of mine was interviewing for a director level position. And he reached out to me and he said, "Hey, I've got this interview. Do you have any questions you recommend that I ask?" And I said, "Absolutely." The question that I would ask them is, as a director, are you going to give me a list of people to manage or are you going to give me a budget to manage? Because that will tell you whether or not you're really a director. Because in my opinion, if you're a director, they're going to hand you a budget and a series of tasks, and you're going to go out and hire the people and manage that team and et cetera, et cetera. If you are really just a glorified manager, team manager, they're going to give you a team and you will have no real say in the makeup of that team. You won't be able to say, "Hey, I'm going to do this a little differently." When we were at our last job, one of the things that I advised is one of our teams was really struggling with kind of an administrative overhead that was being brought on by one of the contracts that they were on. And I said, "So hire somebody 15 bucks an hour to handle that administrative piece and let the expensive people go do the expensive things." And the answer I got back was, "Oh, we can't do that." If you can't make that decision as a director, and actually the person I was talking to at that point was a VP, you're a VP and you can't make the decision that instead of hiring one PM, which is what was being proposed, hire 5 administrative assistants
Mm.
at a low salary. And I understand that there's overhead that comes with that, but hire people to take care of the tasks that are actually eating up that time.
Yeah.
And so back to the remote work, in my opinion, that's that same thing is how do you handle this? Because my feeling is trust is if you don't trust a VP or a director level to make a decision about composition of their team. And I
Yeah.
think this is the same discussion is if I'm installing like mouse idle time or eye tracking technology on your laptop, I already don't trust you. And my
Yeah.
feeling is if you already don't trust me, let me go hire someone you do trust. And I think that's the point you're making is
Yeah.
that accountability doesn't come from monitoring keystrokes, mouse jiggles, or eye movement. It comes from giving clear expectations for tasking,
Yeah.
effective tracking of those tasks, and then a reasonable expectation of level of effort, time consumption, et cetera. That's how you determine whether somebody is delivering.
Yeah.
Track the output, don't track the input. Because my feeling is this I regularly hit writer's block. I regularly hit a level of frustration, or I'm just like, man, this is not coming out the way I want. And I do laundry when I'm pissed because it's the worst thing I can think of. I hate doing laundry. I hate folding laundry. It's just, it's not hell, but it's purgatory, right?
Yeah.
So I go put
Yeah.
myself in purgatory and do something that's so when I'm frustrated enough with what I'm working on, that sounds better. I go. And what I do is I
Yeah.
chew it in the back of my mind. I usually drunk about it. And then hopefully by the time I'm done folding a load in the dryer, out of the dryer, I have some kind of path forward because sometimes it just takes time.
Yeah.
And worst case scenario, I now have shorts to wear tomorrow or whatever. That's something got done, right? But if I was going to sit at my computer and glare at it and be miserable, I may as well fold some laundry. But
Yeah.
does that not work?
Yeah.
My opinion is that's work. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, if you have a healthy employer employee relationship, there's at least room for the possibility that is work.
I agree with you. And all the hires that I have, all the people that were on the team when I originally got there, I did a little exercise, the GW6. Do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do it? That's how you determine if somebody's in the right seat. And from my perspective, if somebody gets it and they want it and they have the capacity to do it, I don't need to track them. I don't need to, all of that goes out the window, right? Because they want it. They want to be there. They want to do the job. They've got the capacity to do the job and they get it. They get why we're doing it, what we're doing it for. So there's a certain level of trust that comes along. Once we get through that GWC exercise, it's okay. I trust that this is the right move for you, whether you're remote or necessarily in person. It's it I've got employees in different time zones, right? So the company's based in Pacific Standard Time. I've got employees that are on the East Coast.
How do you handle that? How, do you do like a core hours approach? Do you just say, nope, this is your 9 to 5 is our 9 to 5? How does that work there?
So let me say this first. I am on the East Coast. The company is on the West Coast. I work Pacific Standard hours.
Okay.
So I'm anywhere between 10 and 11 in the morning and I'm working until 8 or 9 at night. So I say that to say I don't set any expectations for anyone else that I don't set for myself. With that, the employees if they're on the East Coast, it's 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's just our hours. We're a service company though.
It's like people work swing shift
Yeah.
generation. Okay.
We have to be dialed in when our clients need help. And all of our clients are located in California. So, you know, coming in at 8 a.m. Eastern time, unless you're playing catch up, there's
Yeah,
not a
yeah.
lot
And
of
there's a
support.
lot to be said for that, that if you do have the freedom to do that, or usually, like I said, if you've got a first shift, second shift type approach, having people in different time zones can make that really easy and comfortable for them. I saw an article written a little while back by a Twitch streamer in which he was basically complaining that the best time for him to stream was not a good time for him to be a parent, or it's like
Yeah.
when his kids were home. And so he's like, yeah, the only because I'm a video game streamer, I'm not a good parent. And I'll be honest, I looked at that and I was like, there are other places to live, right? Like you can just go west, young man. In his case, east, young man,
Yeah.
like, and I think there's a part of that that remote work enables you to do that.
Yeah.
My my ex-wife used to describe herself as not just not a morning person, but as not an early afternoon person either. And so she was a nurse, she worked night shift and it was great for her. And so these are the sorts of things that remote work all of a sudden enables that
Yeah.
I know people who the idea of 5 a.m. is necessary for some persons and anathema to others. And
Yeah.
so that gives you the freedom to pursue work where you're like, oh man, you kidding me? I could be up at 5 a.m., be done with work by what, 1 p.m., 2 p.m.
Yeah.
And I've got all afternoon, go parent my kids or go to the gym or I don't know, whatever, do whatever those things those early birds do, which is great.
To each their own, right?
Well, I have a young child, so I don't get a choice. I am an early morning
Yeah.
person
Yeah.
by enforcement, not necessarily by nature, nurture, or hostage scenario.
Yeah.
But
When you
let's flip the script.
listen to that.
When I started working as an employee, as a remote work employee, I made myself a commitment. There are basically 2 times that I made major commitments to myself in an attempt to take charge of my life. You mentioned discipline. The first one was my life was not going according to plan when I joined the Navy. And one of the commitments I made to myself when I left boot camp was in boot camp, you get reveille, right? You get the heave out and trice up and get ready for the day moment. And I remember coming out of that and I was like, I'm never snoozing an alarm clock ever again in my life. And I can count on, I was going to say one hand, but I slept in this weekend. So on two hands, I can count the number of times I've slept through an alarm clock since then. Like I don't snooze alarm. When the alarm goes off, I throw my butt out of bed. Even if I set the alarm clock for the wrong time, I will get up when I got up. It was a
Yeah.
huge discipline thing for me. Does everybody else need to do it? No, I was an idiot. Like it took a big adjustment on my part to make it work. But a similar one was when I started remote work and I said, you know what? I owe this company 8 good hours. And I'll tell you right now, part of the reason that I was so dedicated to that company is I started remote work and I was scheduled to start on, I think it was the 1st of April in 2015. And my son had just been born on January 29th. So I was actually out on FMLA when I made the decision to change jobs, which is a little risky. There we go. And my son went into the hospital with a brain hemorrhage on Valentine's Day. And it must have been March 1st because then the dates line up. I'm literally calling the guy that I'm supposed to start work for. And I'm like, my son's in the hospital and I don't know if he's going to make it. I don't know what to do. And he said, no problem. I'm going to backdate your start date. You're going to receive a paycheck tomorrow. It was the 14th of February. He's like, I'm going to backdate you to the 1st. You'll receive a paycheck on the 15th. Now I was still getting paid by my other. And then he said, and I'll make sure that your health insurance kicks in because we only have a 15-day delay. I want to make sure you have two double coverage because it's probably not going to be cheap. And frankly, I have the freedom to do that. So when I came to this guy, you got to understand, I was already ready to take a bullet for this guy. His name is Nathan.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I got to make sure that Nathan gets his money back on me because this boy, like he invested in me. So what I said was, I'm going to give him 8 good hours. And as you and I know, does not necessarily take me 8 calendar hours to give 8 good ones. And so there were times when it was like, my son would go to bed and I'd be like, I didn't crush it today. I didn't get there. 8 o'clock at night, I'd jump back into my office for an
Oh
hour,
yeah.
hammer something else out, or sometimes that background processing, it kicked in. I was like, I know exactly what to do next. I'm
Yeah.
not going to bed. I'm going to go do it right now. That for me is how I got I've always called it 8 good hours.
Mhm.
What about you? Do you have a thing like that? Because you mentioned discipline. What is that discipline that you're talking
I got a very good relationship with the owners of the organization that I work with today. There's just this kind of like innate trust there that the way I look at it is I owe these guys a minimum of 8 hours a day, right? Make that nine, plus hours some days, but it's a matter of staying focused on what I have going on, weaving out the distractions, right? Whatever's going on, somebody ringing the doorbell, somebody's knocking on the door, the guy's here to mow the grass, right? There's always constantly these like little mini distractions going on. And it starts with kind of tuning that out. The other problem is I mentioned that I work until 8 at night, right? I have two little girls. So my office situated in the house is when you come in the front door, immediately to the right is my office. There's two huge French doors right here. So they come home from school, they come back from the grocery, whatever it may be. I'm like the first thing they see when they walk in the door. And so it was a matter of helping them understand what is an emergency, what's not an emergency, how to wave and smile walking in the door instead of just barging through the doors while I'm in the middle of a meeting. And just being like loyal, I guess is the best way to put it, loyal to the company that I work for and using my time as best as possible. That's what it comes down to. Uh,
So it
do
sounds like
things
you have
come
a
up?
very similar mindset with regard to that. Because I looked a while
Yeah.
back. There have been a couple of studies that say the average employee only does about 4 to 6 hours of labor in a workday. And
Mm.
for me, I find a professional work environment, an office building to be very distracting. Lots of people to talk to, lots of
Mhm.
things going on, lots of context switching as people stop by and ask questions and things like that.
Oh
So
yeah.
I feel more efficient as a remote worker.
Yeah.
I recognize that is not for everybody. And something Evie and I talked about, she's an office person. She likes the office. And I told her that I was very, very busily, not publicly judging her out loud, that I would keep those thoughts
Yeah.
out. But But the truth is boundaries, right? Like even at the office, you need boundaries because you can't spend the whole day at the water cooler. Not that anybody has those at the coffee machine, chit chatting with people about the sports ball event that just passed, working on talking about your golf game or whatever. That's not a productive day either. I think that my 8 good hour rule actually made me an absolutely incredible employee because the studies show that most employees don't give 8 hours, don't give anywhere near 8 hours. And I think it made me a strong performer early on. I think it's one of those things that I didn't really realize how much that was powering my career. I think the other thing that's worth considering is if the average employee only works 4 to 6 hours a day, if you work 8, you are improving more than they are. You are improving by a third to a half, getting more repetition, more practice, more hands-on than they are. And I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan. If our goal is to get to that 10,000 hours of mastery of something, there's 2008 working hours in 2024. And that's the stuff that you randomly know when you're a CEO. There's 2008 hours. That's 5 years of labor to get to 10,000 hours of mastery on something.
Yep.
Only if you're doing that thing for all of those hours. And I think we just know there's a reality that not everybody can. So that's how it worked for me. I do think that there's a side of this that's worth mentioning, and I think we've glossed over it. Well, assuming healthy relationship with your employer, because some employee-employer relationships are quid pro quo. And by that, I call it a job vice a career. In a job, you look at it and you're like, yep, they're getting something out of me. And I have to make sure that I get mine too. That I build boundaries, set barriers, and make sure that I don't get sucked in or taken advantage of, because that certainly happens.
Yep.
The flip side is at times you find a job and you're like, I think I could make a career here. I want to invest of myself in it. And that's also part of a healthy relationship, knowing the boundary between those two. We talked about something a minute ago that was interesting to me is this idea of tracking output rather than input. Here's my question for you. This is purely discussion topic. If you have an employee and they can output in 4 hours more than the rest of the team can output, any other person on the team can output in 8, do you care if they only work 4?
Ooh, that's tricky.
Inquiring minds want to know.
So I'll answer this 2 ways, right? One, as I'm in a leadership role for someone else's organization. And then I'll answer that question as I'm the owner of an organization.
Okay. I like that. Yes.
So from the stance of I'm in a leadership role for someone else's organization, I probably hired you because I detected that you had the ability to do more in 4 hours than an average person could do in 8 hours. That was probably something that caught my eye there. And by the book, I pay you for 8 hours and I want you to give me 8 of your best hours if you can on a daily basis. Things happen, things come up. I get it 100%. Those that are performing and doing and the output is top tier, I'm probably going to let more things slide, if you will. I do on the guy is marginally outputting less. So there's that piece of it. Now, from my perspective of I'm the owner of the organization, I've got an employee who can do more. And for me, it's always been different. For the longest time in my own organization, we didn't track time because time wasn't something that I wasn't buying. I looked at it as I'm not buying your time. I'm buying your performance and your ability. And basically what you said, your output. I am buying output. In that case, I've had guys that probably only work 4 hours some days. And it was never a real conversation. Now, granted, something went wrong and we're working until 4 a.m. Those are the guys that are there with me, right?
Right. I've definitely seen that where there's 2 sides of that, right? There's if the 4 hours means they're willing to do 20 when it's necessary. Yeah, I'm on team hell yeah at that point. Like, if
Yeah.
now I've had the flip side. I've had the flip side where I've seen people who were because they're like, nah, I churned out as much work as the rest of these clowns. I'm gonna go hit the bar. And then they weren't available. And I don't want to, you know, it's not the bar, but like they were unavailable. Like, no, I
Yeah. Yeah.
took a nap. I can't get a hold of you. Just as big a problem as I went and had a beer again, or I went golfing.
Yeah.
It's as bad, right? Like, if you're incommunicado and I need you, that changes the equation. But let's just say,
Yeah.
for the sake of this initial discussion, they knock out their 4 hours and then they're like, yeah, I'll answer email or Slack or whatever. But I'm pretty much done after their 4
Yeah.
hours of crushing it.
Yeah.
I
There's
think
also a level of transparency there, though, in communication. That's another key thing I think I mentioned earlier is like in that remote workforce, it's so imperative for communication. I'll just very vaguely, again, I have a lot of employees that are remote amongst a number of organizations, but
you're not going to tell any of them about this podcast now because our viewership going to.
that's I pinged someone and said, hey, let's get a chance to chat. A couple hours goes by, I don't hear from them. And then finally I ping them, hey, are you on site? Are you free? Are you available? Their response to me, oh, I fell asleep for the last 4 hours. Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Part of me respects that individual a little more because they informed somebody in my role within the organization. I was work from home. I took a nap, right? I get that. Maybe give me a heads up in advance instead of after the fact, right?
I'm a
Because of
migraine
scheduling.
sufferer. I wear my glasses for migraines. Actually, prevent them, not con on the con. So yeah, that happens. There are times
Yeah.
like, oh, holy cow, Ragnarok is taking place inside my
Yep.
dome. I need to go do something about this. He's right. Accountability, transparency, communication, really important. And that seems
Yeah.
like we've said that a lot when it comes to remote work, right? Is
Yeah.
accountability, transparency, equitability, right? So as we talk about this more and more, I feel like I want to ask more questions. For instance, if you have that one employee who can do in 8 hours twice as much work as the guy next to him, we should probably be paying him twice as much. And the problem you start running into is now one of like corporateness, corporate structure. Is there flexibility to say, hey, and this is a part of goes back to that director question. Look, I'm the director. I see this guy, his volume of labor is exceeds that of anyone else. I'm going to pay him. I know we have a slot for a second employee. I'm going to pay him 2 employee slots. Why? He fills them both. She fills them both. Is that going to fly? Is that going to cause a run on the bank from other people who start overvaluing? Like, it's a complicated question. I freely acknowledge that. And if you're that guy who can do twice as much, I can totally understand it. You're sitting there, you're like, I'm making 20% more. Why should I work 8 hours? I'm going to hit 5 hours and do 20% more, and everybody's going to be fine with it. So, from my perspective, I'm in the I'm in the owner mode of my career. And so I feel like an hours relationship with employees is my least desirable one. That then, first of all, there's just like all kinds of language you end up using that just is really uncomfortable as a white guy who's familiar with American history. I don't like speaking to people about what they owe me or how much they need to do for me or what have you. And really like an output based relationship because then it is, behold what my hands have wrought. It is valuable. Here is compensation for that. And it seems like a much more equal relationship.
Yeah.
When I draw my org charts, I put me at the bottom because in my mind, like I'm on overhead. I'm supporting my team. I'm not the person satisfying the customer. I'm not the engine of this company. So my job is I'm not at the top. Like I just go find the work. That's what I do. I have a different role. And so I really like that output based relationship because that means that we are interacting on a much more equal level when it comes to our relationship. And then the cool thing is they can now communicate with me about income, which is one of those difficult topics It's always
Yeah, yeah.
money is so awkward because it's so important and yet is so taboo at the same time. I've always said, I had a friend of mine approach me a while back about, I want to raise. And I said, come with a spreadsheet. And
Yeah.
what? I said, listen, anytime you ask your raise, come with a spreadsheet. Quantify your value to the company. They were actually
Yep.
teaching. And so I was like, look, how many classes you taught? They know what they charge per seat, what their overhead is for travel and expenses and stuff like that. And then your average review from students and tie that to repeat business that when you go teach a class, they get repeat business. And so you can say, listen, last week I went and taught a class. And for that week, I made for some of these classes, the math on classes can be astonishing. $5,000 a seat, 20 seats, 100 grand.
Yeah.
I teach every other week. I'm bringing this company 80 grand in profit every other week. So talking about times 25 weeks a year, no one can do that math, but it's 2 million bucks. And if you're sitting there, I would like to change that from 80% profit every other week to 77% profit, and double my pay is a tough conversation. My profit margin will go from 80% to 77% is a much easier conversation.
Mm.
And that's the sort of thing that so that's why I say I always bring a spreadsheet. And the cool thing is that's a very equal conversation. I understand our relationship. This is what I'm doing.
Yep.
Here's the additional things I'm willing to bring to the table. What about this? What about that? I like that type of relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of your questions was, do we have an extra seat available on the team? This guy's pumping out more work. Do we give him another salary basically on top? And I look at it a little differently than that. Once I have somebody on the team, they're outputting like that. And my mind goes in a different direction. Where can I elevate this
And
individual? He's clearly exceeding or succeeding very well in his role right now. How can I put this individual in a team lead position? How can I put this person in a pod lead position? How can I let him go and thrive even more and take on more accountability? Because whether it took him 4 hours, 6 hours, or 8 hours, this guy is pumping out serious amount of work. I want him to lead a team, right? I want him to be a leader. I want him to be a coach. I want him to be a mentor for a whole group of individuals, right? Because whatever his secret sauce is, I want this group of individuals to get that as well, to understand that, to have that same GWC, if you will, that this individual had, because he really gets it. And of course, with that comes a conversation about compensation.
I think, by the way, I think you just said something incredibly important there. And so I'm going to totally
Yeah.
interrupt you to add to what you just said.
Yeah.
The thing that I think you basically said is it's my responsibility to leave them in a position where they want to do the 8 hours instead of
Yeah.
their responsibility, exclusively their responsibility. Look, man, I pay you for 8, you got to do for it. I think it's a brilliant awareness to say, hey, look, I see you crushing it. There's also an aspect of mentorship here. There's a company I worked for in the past. There was this guy who was an absolute genius, a legend, a like monster when it came to doing work. And he is one of the worst cases of, I'm going to say mismanagement, and that's being unfair. But what happened was he became the crutch for everyone. When you had a problem, you went to him and he made the problem go away. And the thing was, the knowledge stayed with him. And I would have actually gone the opposite direction and been like, look, you can spend 30 hours a week working. And he was a 60-hour a week guy. But your other 30, you must be hands off the keyboard telling somebody else to do a thing. You
Yeah.
must be creating mini yous. Right. And I think that's what you're talking about. That's why you want to get him into a lead, mentor.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like you want them investing back into the people around them.
Yeah.
You want to create little mini, they use the term unicorn a lot, right? And I did a talk a while back about breeding unicorns in captivity. That's what you want, right? Like you want little unicorns running around, not one person, right? You don't want excellence
Yeah.
in lieu of system. And then you get that person investing back in the system and the whole organization grows. And I think
Yeah.
that is the right answer to this question for these high performing people is how do you find something that you, as the owner, as the manager, as the leader, that's all on you to find the thing that makes them pop so that
Yeah.
now instead of doing their 4 hours and being around for the rest of the day, now they're like, I want to do 8. I want to give you my 8 because this is
Yeah.
my thing.
When you put somebody in a role, when they're doing a job, a task, assignment, whatever you want to call it. But if I'm waking up every day and genuinely just loving what I'm doing, I'm in the perfect place in life. I'm doing exactly what I've always wanted to do. I'm doing it really well. I feel compelled to give 8 hours, right? Because I don't want to just work 4 hours and cut short. I'm thriving. I'm
Yeah.
enjoying myself. I'm having fun. I'm going to put in 8 hours. I'm probably going to put in 9 just because that's just what it is, right? I'm loving what I'm doing. So identifying that, whether it's a remote employee or an on-site employee, just an employee, no matter what, finding a way for them to be able to wake up every day and say, I love exactly what I'm doing. This is what I was meant to do. Then the argument goes away of whether they need to work 4 hours or 8 hours because they want to show up and give it their all. And that's what I found. Like an engineer that can do all this work in 4 hours, but then what does he do with the other 4 hours? He's in the wrong role. You
Right.
know what I mean? Yes, he's really good at what he's doing for 4 hours, but he's in the wrong place. Elevate him. Give him more opportunity. That tells me one thing, and that's that individual doesn't have enough opportunity in the role that they're in. So elevate them up. Give them more responsibility and then assess the situation. And I've done that. And oftentimes, these people that are really good at that task, they may not be good leaders. So you got to be willing to invest in that. And I've put for my mid-level management team, I've put leadership coaching in place. We've done structure. We run off like the EOS operating system, but the entrepreneur's operating system. And so we have the L10s and we've got all of this structure, right? I found that just giving individuals that structure, continuing to work to elevate them, that whole 8 hour thing, it starts to dissipate because people are loving what they're doing. They want to show up. They want to be there. They feel attached to the success of the organization. And once you give them that kind of a place where they understand the levers, they understand the impact on the organization that they have, then it becomes then it can be considered time or output based because they're going to sit there and pump it out and you're going to get the output that you deserve or that you seek.
The Heh, I was actually talking to one of the people on my team, and I can't say enough good things about them. But at one point, they
Right.
stopped holding the reins, and I was like, "I don't hold the reins. Most of what I do is I do everything I can to smooth the waters out, but then I'm water
Yep.
skiing along behind. I'm just trying to keep up, man. Like y'all are pulling the boat. Like I'm just here in many ways along for the ride as people get in the right places, as processes are developed I think one of the big challenges that employers have is you go hire a rock star and then that rock star starts solving problems for you. And it's really
Mhm.
easy to get lazy and be like, ah, excellent. Our problem solving flow chart is problem. Hand to rockstar. Excellent. Complete, right? That is, I call that excellence in place of process, right?
Yeah.
That's not a good process. And
No.
it runs into this problem of the guy I was talking about, where the people around him, it actually created, I think, like almost a cultural issue where it was this person's going to work really hard so we can all take off. There were people who didn't feel trusted to solve problems that they were the only person who could solve the problems. That's not the case.
Yeah.
No. And if you can't solve problems, then you're not in the right position or at the right team or at the right company
Yeah.
or in the right role. So you should be able to solve problems. You need to be empowered to solve problems. By the way, that other person needs to be able to, I used to call when I was at Fort Meade, they called it the hit by bus plan. It
I
was
say
like
that
what
all the time.
happens. By the way, I heard it. Evie called it the won the lottery plan. I like that a lot more. That is much less morbid. The Pete won the lottery and doesn't show up tomorrow. What do we do? I like the sound of that a lot better.
I call it the hit by the beer truck. Walk out of the house and get hit by a beer truck. We got to have a
Oh
contingency
my,
plan.
there's a one of my favorite TV shows. It's called Sirens. It was on for a season and a half. Brilliant. But there was a scene where a guy is like working for the city and a piece of rebar impales him. And he's like, oh, see? And he's, oh yeah, man, I'm finally gonna retire down in Bermuda because I got hit by the like this is gonna make my trip. So right. It's like I was hit by a truck and I won the lottery. But the point is like when you have that dependency on a person, now there's no continuity if that person changes jobs or wins the lottery or whatever. There's no empowerment of the people on their team because those people can often feel stifled, right? By there's a big tree and there's no sun for anybody else around them. They can suck up a lot of the oxygen in the room. So I think there's a lot of really interesting things. And these problems are compounded by remote work because,
Yeah.
as this is where I wanted to bring this back to, and it's only taken me 51 minutes to do so. But there's this whole employer side of the program. And I think remote workers, there are many advantages, but the management, the people management, a lot of that stuff in an office is incidental. Like, how
Right.
many times have you heard the word side saddle? You just sit a junior person near a senior person and they get better magically by like osmosis. They just absorb the brilliant gooiness from the seat next to them. That doesn't work in remote work. It has to be more intentional. Like you mentioned pods.
Yeah.
Like you have to put together co-working pods that this is the person you come to with questions like this. That is the person you come to with questions like that. There's a process for those things. And
Yeah.
I suspect that's why big corporations, they depend on these kind of cultural hot fixes, I'm going to say, is adjacency
Yeah.
as a training mechanism. Just like good people helping each other out is part of that corporate structure. Whereas small businesses, there may never have been a chance for my team to be co-located. I'm here in Pensacola, Florida. I don't know if I could have found all of the people I need to do all the things that my team needs to do here in
Yeah.
Pensacola. Might could have to get a location and have everybody there and then do osmosis-based learning. That's suboptimal for me. So I
Yeah.
have to have processes. And you mentioned things like coaching. What are some of those other things you do organizationally to overcome or to adapt for the not having office osmosis? I'm going to call it a term and we're going to pretend like it's a real thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's crazy. Because you were just talking a minute ago, and the first person I'm thinking of is Sean Walsh. So one thing that I can say that he did brilliantly was constantly having those catch up calls in the morning, right? Bringing the team together. Hey, these are the problems that we're facing. You know what I mean? And just constantly getting in front of the entire team. One of the things that I remember is like Sean Walsh never said cameras on. Everybody showed up cameras on. It
Sure.
just was, it just happened.
It was true.
I
And
can't
let's be
think
honest,
one time where
there
he
was
said
one
camera on.
person who sometimes didn't have a camera on, but that's because they were golfing and we all knew it.
They were doing what?
They were golfing and we all knew it.
That's my buddy.
It's worked out. Did anybody complain? No.
Nobody complained. But so there was that piece of it, right? The other aspect of it is having, so I go out to California like about 4 times a year, right? And I take that time while I am there to really bring everybody together, right? I want to, let's go out and have dinners. We have Huntress has the breaches and back doors, right? So we'll get the entire team together in the conference room after hours and run a couple of games of breaches and back doors. And it's just about that. There's more to it than work, and just trying to connect with all these individuals on that level outside of just, hey, you didn't put in 8 hours today. Are you going to make up that time? Like, that's just not really the kind of management style that I've got. I think that's it. It's having those, whether they're scheduled or impromptu, whatever, but bringing the team together, setting very clear expectations with them so that they're not left wondering, am I doing a good job? Instead, they've got clear expectations. So it is, I know I am doing a good job. That's another key aspect of it. Yeah, it was nice rolling out of the role that I was in and into this role, because I had been remote and I had worked remotely for somebody that was pretty damn good at leading a fully remote team. Again, shout out Sean Walsh, but it's picking up on the way that he operated and allowing us to not be on a leash, but we were all there. You know what I mean? When we needed to be, we were all there, cameras on, fully focused,
Yep.
no questions asked. And so that whole experience of working with him really gave me a different perception right before going into this role.
I think
Legendary.
exactly right. Yeah, no, and we both got to work for Sean at the same time, which was really
Yeah.
impactful. I think that one of the things that you mentioned about Sean is he would get out in front of things. And there was
Yeah.
just such a striking level of openness. I was going to say
Yeah.
transparency, but it's even more than that. Because I feel
Yeah.
like transparency is, oh, here's the situation. Let me give you a transparent view of it. There was openness on things that I can't imagine most team leads briefing their team in on. He would be open about all kinds of things with us internally so that we had not just the necessary picture of our piece of the puzzle, but a bigger puzzle, bigger
Yeah.
overview of how we fit into the greater puzzle, objectives that were coming on, things down the road. And it empowered you, gave you an understanding of what next, where to. If I have a choice between A and B, I now had enough context that I could pretty confidently say or B with an understand. So it was funny because I could say A or B with an understanding of the greater context without having to go back and ask for help. And so that was the
Yeah.
thing. He delegated trust downward and authority came with it because the things you didn't know how to solve became fewer and fewer because of the knowledge, the awareness, the trust that you got. I think, and I think we could talk about this topic forever because essentially we've just hit on when you're talking about remote work and the employer responsibility to the employee. We're basically talking leadership, and leadership is an infinite topic. So to bring it back to this, what I'm hearing a lot of is something that I believe very firmly in, which is there needs to be a significant burden of leadership. There needs to be like being a good leader is not something that just happens. It requires intention.
Yeah.
And you've described a bunch of different ways that you've acted with intention. So to sum up, I heard you talk about coaching. I heard you talk about placement to make sure that that a person who's performing isn't just left there. And actually, there's an exploitative aspect of taking somebody who's a great performer and leaving them there. And I've seen this happen where managers are like, "Oh, you're too good to be promoted because you're making me look good." And that's oh my gosh, it's just
Yeah.
I don't have a word strong enough to describe how exploitative that is. Exploitative. You're making me look good, so I'm not going to reward you for that. Like it's short-sighted and exploitative, and that's even worse than regular exploit, right? Because it hurts the people around you long term, can crush that excellence in that person. There's so much ill that can come out of it. But placing people, rewarding excellence, recognizing excellence, identifying it, all of those require a lot of labor of love, a lot of cultivation, if you will, of this workforce. Is there anything else that you want to add to that kind of list, just to sum up? Maybe this is like what is your Goldwater doctrine? What is the Snuggs doctrine when it comes to leadership management, in particular, as it comes to remote work?
Yeah. And one thing I'll just say, I've been in that position where somebody's been like, "Hey, this is the role for you because you're making me look." But that's so zoomed in. Just zoom out a little bit and think about how you'll look when you elevate that individual
Right.
here. And they're making that much of an impact here. Imagine the impact they're going to make here. So that's such a selfish, and not even fully understanding the levers. That just shows that, hey, you're not a good leader just for that right
So hard
there.
to come up with the word to describe that, but it's just bad leadership. And
It's bad leadership. That's
that
it.
should
That's
be a
it.
four-letter word. It's like bad leader. It should be one word, 4 letters, leader. Right? That's what we need. We just don't have it. Yeah.
We'll have to try to see if we can develop
Now, let's
for it.
not try too hard. My son might watch this.
And uh, another episode. So yeah, it's really about, for me, it's about the right leadership, the right team, the right mission, being intentional, setting clear expectations, being being present. And it's weird to use to say be present. But again, you're so remote, right? It's like, how do you want me to be present? But being present, being available, being supportive, understanding things happen. It's having this, at least having some level of compassion. Right? Now, what I don't have so much compassion that, like, you know, that you don't even see it.
But yes,
Yeah. You don't get exploited because you're so compassionate. It's the perfect combination. Identifying that people make mistakes, that people aren't perfect, working through them with that. It's just like you mentioned, there's a job and there's a career. I want to find people that want a career, because once I know that they want the career, that this is big picture for them, now I can work through the small things. Now I can get a coach to come in and help you figure out how to do this or do that. If I think this is just a job or a stepping stone for you, which I'm not knocking you, don't get me wrong. Everybody needs stepping stones within their career. But those individuals, I'm not as much going to say, let me invest in correcting these issues as much as they are just, hey, they're issues. And we're either
that
going
it
to live
just
with each other.
goes, yeah, like everything goes both ways, right? That's what makes a
Yeah.
relationship healthy
Yeah.
when it comes to employment. Is
Yeah.
I, as an employer, am investing in you, and you're investing in me. That's wonderful. That's career. That's team. I don't like using the word family when it comes to business. We've talked about this before. Family's a complicated word.
BA's family
Like,
though.
but and I'll be honest with you, it's probably just past trauma, because I feel like everybody's like, well, we're a family here. I'm about to get sold a false bill. Like, I'm about to get taken advantage of. Like, here it comes. Get ready. Here it comes. But you're right. Like, that investment, that equal give and take, that rising tide floats all boats. But
Yeah.
if it's, and so the flip side is, okay, if it's a quid
Yeah.
pro quo, if it's, I give you money, you give me output, you give me labor, like, that's okay. That's still healthy.
Yeah.
It may
Yeah.
not be growth. It may not be future. We're not going to have equivalent of business wedding bells in our future, but that's all right. That's still a healthy relationship.
Yep. 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 Every organization has those that are there for the long term, that are growers, right? You've got growers and you've got doers, right? And so you, at the same time, you have to split those individuals in who is here to grow and who is here to just do. And they both serve a purpose, right? I mean, there's just work to be churned out. And there's nothing wrong with just having people that are there, do that work. They're not really interested in growing. It is what it is. But I try to keep those that I know are wanting to grow, want to be here. This is long term, should be long term. Try to keep them close to me. And it's funny that you mentioned that. You're right. It's like the minute we start calling each other family, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, this is it. This is the top. Like, it's all downhill. It's all downhill from here. So
It's funny because I've got a great family personally, but every time, like, y'all don't know the standard you just set for yourself. If you want to try to be like my dad, you gotta be a hill to climb. I'm just saying, like, you may not want to stand for yourself. I'm gonna expect a lot out of you.
Oh man. No, I will say the last piece of it when it comes to remote work, and this goes back to the employer side. It's so fascinating with this remote workforce because we are based in California and the cost of labor is so extensive. And so when I come in and I'm looking at this team and I'm like, how can I find top tier talent fits within a budget? And ultimately it's just,
Is the
there's some
I
really
know.
strong guys in North Carolina.
I get it.
There's some really strong talent out there in the Carolinas. So I don't have it. I'm the only employee in the Carolinas. So I joke there, but it does allow us to cast that net further and wider to procure talent that we may not have been able to afford, or experience that we may not have been able to afford when you're looking right in the area. It's
Right.
just, so it's opened a lot of doors for us.
Well, think about the flip side is I live here in Pensacola, Florida. I assure you,
Yep.
the cost of living here in the booming metropolis, Pensacola, is not what it is in the Bay Area. And so to
Oh
be
yeah.
able to earn, even if it's not what is getting, even if it's not dollar for dollar what somebody in the Bay Area is earning, because you do have to have people who walk into a customer site and they need to be on call. Like they have to be there. You got to pay for that. You got to make that happen. But
Yeah.
to be able to earn an appreciative significance of Bay Area pay and live in Pensacola, what a blessing, right? Like remote work,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
incredible
Absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. Cool.
Where I live is not the Bay Area. It is, but I get
Yeah.
to show up every day and go to work.
Yeah, we
I'm
have
very happy.
a bay in our area, but it's not the same thing. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
We have no bays, but I still get to show up for a job. It comes with a ton of perks. So yeah,
Well, Kramer, I can't tell you, first of all, I love talking to you. I love your heart
excellent.
and where you are. And I really appreciate you sharing your perspective as well. And can't tell you how great it was catching up, hearing your opinion. Hopefully, we'll have you back on. I got a couple other things in the back of my mind that I think your input would be really valuable for. Again, thanks as always. Like, comment, share, follow, subscribe. Don't have a Patreon. I feel like I ought to, but thank you very much. And we'll see you next time on WannaCyber.